we had this idea that we were going to solve this problem rationally, that we were going to go and talk with our political leaders, and they would then understand the problem and do the right thing. They'd have big conferences in Copenhagen or The Hague or wherever it was and figure out what the right thing was to do and do it. That didn't work out. And it didn't work out because the power of the fossil fuel industry, of the coal and oil and gas industry, was enough to prevent those leaders from doing what they should have.
Yeah.
Even in places that are generally pretty good about these things. So, for instance, the American Petroleum Institute, which is sort of the front group for big oil, told Barack Obama that he faced, as they put it, serious electoral consequences unless he did a lot more oil drilling and things. Well, Barack Obama's been going all over the country this year saying we're drilling everywhere, we're drilling for more oil, all of the above energy that's my answer, more oil, more gas, more coal, more everything, that's how it works, at least here. Yeah. Companies like ExxonMobil or Chevron or Peabody Coal or whatever dominate our Congress and have prevented any action from taking place.
Yeah.
So we're never going to have successful conferences at Copenhagen or Rio or anything until we build a movement of people big enough to challenge the power of that fossil fuel industry.
Because how does it work in the US? Because in my country it's not that strong that you have those, or I think it's not that strong that you have those big corporations lobbying the Congress. But
it's definitely, in this country and in much of the world, the power of corporations to affect policy is extraordinarily strong. The fossil fuel industry is one of the biggest contributors to campaigns for Congress and the president, and they are able to win almost every battle that's ever come up.
Yeah.
That same thing is true in many of the important countries in the world. There are a few exceptions, places that have really done a good job of trying to tackle this. For my money, the best example is probably Germany. Earlier this year, a few weeks ago in fact, the Germans managed on one day in the month of June to generate more than half the electricity they used that day from solar panels within their borders. Now Germany, is a pretty far northern country. What that says to me is the obstacles in our path are not technological. We know how to do this stuff. The obstacles are political. We're not doing it.
Because like in the US Congress, how much money are we talking about?
Yeah, it's, the US Congress gives fossil fuel subsidies. They'll give $100 billion over the next 10 years. So we're trying to take that away. But then the real issue, of course, as you know, is the biggest subsidy of all. The fossil fuel companies alone among industries are allowed to pour their waste into the atmosphere for free.
Yeah. Put
their carbon out there for free. That's why they make more money than any industry has ever made. So that's what we got to take away, that special privilege, and we'll see if we can. And if they burn all the reserves that they have, these companies, then we have no chance of slowing down climate change.
Oh. We're seeing it now, right? Like you have, currently you have floods, fires, droughts.
This month in the U.S. is like it's just a sort of preview, when you go to the movies and it's like a preview of coming attractions, here's what we're going to be showing you, and look, this is like what global warming feels like in its early stages. It's record heat day after day. Crops are drying up across the country. We've had wildfires sweeping across the Rocky Mountain West, storms like no one's ever seen before, people out of power for weeks on end. It's a horror show. And as I say, that we're still at the beginning of climate change.
The expanding drought and extreme heat wave have had millions of us sweating it out for the past few weeks, but we haven't seen the full impacts just yet.
Well, storms, they are bringing some relief to hot and dry Colorado, but of course there's a drawback. Rain is triggering flooding in areas ravaged by the recent wildfires. And these scenes here, they're from Buena Vista, Colorado. And so it becomes a concern with flooding that you can lead to problems with mudslides and that sort of thing in many areas. There are still numerous fires across the West. You can see some of the active fires that we are following. And as we look to Colorado and the Waldo Canyon fire, now this fire is continuing to burn here. And right now we've had 18,000 acres plus that have been burned. It is 98% contained, but remember too, in Colorado, that we have 64% of the state in moderate drought and 47, almost half, in severe drought.
We've raised the temperature 1 degree. We're likely to raise it another degree even if we do everything right from here on in, because there's a lot of carbon out in the atmosphere that still hasn't fully expressed its warming potential. So the question now is not, can we stop global warming? It's, can we stop it at some level where we can still have something that looks like civilizations? And that's a very open question. 2 degrees will be very hard to cope with. 4 degrees, impossible, probably. So we can make a huge difference. A huge difference. It's the greatest, most important fight that human beings have ever engaged in. It's just not a fight where one of the outcomes is beautiful, you know. We're not going to win. The question is, how badly are we going to lose? And that's a really, really important question. That's why I've spent the last 4 or 5 years not so much writing, although I still do some, but organizing. And we've built this movement called 350.org, beginning 4 years ago with myself and 7 young people, 7 college students, into the first big global group focused just on climate change.
Yeah.
And we've been successful in certain ways. We've organized 20,000 demonstrations in every country on earth except North Korea.
People around the world are using today as a day of action in fighting climate change.
Hundreds of environment campaigners gathered in Edinburgh today.
Wien haben mehr als 200 Klimaaktivisten mit einer sogenannten Climate Silent Parade demonstriert.
Dia de ação mundial para alertar contra as alterações climáticas.
Idag så samlas människor över hela världen för att uppmärksamma klimatfrågan.
385 partes por milhão e a tendência é para aumento acelerado.
How did you mobilized millions?
Yeah,
How did you do that?
The first time that we had a big day of action in 2009, there were just the 7 of us, you know, myself and 7 young people. So there were 7 continents. So each one of them took a continent and went to work. We didn't know how it would go. We didn't have any money or anything, but we did have the internet, and that sort of was a new, sort of helpful in this way, because it's cheap to use. Well, anyway, on that day, we had, sort of to our surprise, 5,200 demonstrations in 181 countries. CNN, the TV channel, said it was the most widespread day of political activity in the planet's history. It was all done by young people with no money over the course of about 18 months. Okay, they just found that there were people all over the world who understood what the problem was and wanted to do something about it. And so really, all we had to do was just kind of ask.
So I talked to Paul Gilding, and he said that we're really going from those old structures to new structures. So what I'm really trying to find is where those new structures are building already. And I think you're building one.
We set it up so that it's not like a, it's not like you have to get married to it, like some organization. It's more like your girlfriend, or I don't even quite know. It's like we set it up as a campaign, not an organization, so that everybody can play. Every organization can be part of it, you know, which is nice. Instead of like having competing organizations, and we try to work with everybody.
Yeah.
Which is what we like to do.
So, do you agree? I wrote it down. I think like 350.org is like working across organizational cultures, loosely organized with plenty of room for creativity and freedom, working together for a common goal.
I think that's exactly right. We don't worry about, the kind of what you might call the brand or something, you know. We very trust everyone around the world to just like take this and do good things with it. And they do. I mean, the biggest challenge is just how do you get big enough to win? And to do that, we need to be as powerful as the most powerful industry in the world. Since we're never going to have as much money as they have, we're going to have to figure out other currencies to work in. Passion, spirit, creativity, numbers, that's what we can bring. Sometimes, the currency we have to spend is the currency of our own bodies. And so, off to jail we go for a few days or whatever.
Why do you focus so much on young people?
We work, I'd say, most with young people. Partly that's because young people have a very big stake in all of this. I'm only going to be here another 25, 30 years. If I'm lucky, you're going to be here another 65, 70 years.
Yeah.
Okay? So you've got, it very much behoove you to make sure that things are going to be okay towards the end of that time.
Yeah.
Young people are less set in their ways and less set in their habits. So the idea that you might not be driving your car everywhere is less scary to you if you're young than if you've been doing it for 35 years, And I think the actual answer to this is I tend to do it just because in certain ways I'm sort of a slightly young person myself, in that I'm not very responsible in the adult sense of the word. So
young in mind.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So that's just who I kind of naturally gravitate to.
Yeah.
In fact, most of the young people who work with me are far more responsible and mature and organized and whatever than I am.
You have to structure you.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you understand that a lot of my friends and my generation, we feel a bit confused and sometimes also powerless? Like, what can we do as young people?
Hun, all of us feel that way, young and old, okay? So all we really can do is come together in large movements and work really strongly together. History indicates that's what makes things happen, okay? And American history is good in this way. It gives us some reasons to hope, because we have in recent memory the civil rights movement, and Dr. King, and the rise of the women's movement in this country, and the rise of the gay rights movement, and we've been able to see how these things really work and can get some good done.
So then, what would be your message for young people?
I think my message mostly for young people is, don't spend all your time thinking of yourselves as young people. Just think of yourselves as people, politically powerful actors. Don't allow yourselves to be patronized. Don't go off to conferences and go to Youth Day and get patted on the head and whatever. Do what you have to take charge of those things, including if that means being unruly. I always tell the young people I work most closely with just that they're not young people. They're incredibly gifted political activists. And that's true potentially of millions of young people around the world.
So don't feel powerless.
Don't feel powerless. Go out and make power yourself. Not easy. Scary sometimes. Worth a try.